Larisha with Another Melanated Adventure. And first off, I want to say thank you so much for those who have tuned in and who have subscribed to our channel. That is so awesome. And right now I'm going to tell you about today's episode. This is sort of a rewind, and we're going back to last summer where we visited our nation's capital in Washington, D.C. The reason we were in Washington, D.C. was for my family reunion. We were supposed to have it in 2020, but because of COVID, it got pushed out a couple of years. But outside of it being really hot, we had a really good time. So stay tuned, you'll find out about one of the hotels that we will never return to. We had plans to stay there for a couple of days after our reunion, and after one night we left. So find out why. Also, you may pick up some tips for your next trip to Washington, D.C. Thanks again. This was the first red-eye trip that we've ever taken the kids on, and the jury's still out if that was a good idea or not. They were very tired the entire next day though. Since the hotel was not ready for us, we decided to go take a look around the sites. We started at the Washington Monument. We made our way past the World War II Memorial and then over to the Lincoln Memorial, which was an extremely long walk, and there were a lot of complaints about how hot it was and how far it was. And you can see the distance from here. It's definitely worthwhile taking your children to the nation's capital whenever you get the opportunity. This is stuff they see on television, so to actually bring it to reality, where the March on Washington was, where Martin Luther King stood when he gave his famous speech, is all stuff that they will always remember. Not sure why the water was green here though. Also, too, it's worth mentioning the accomplishments of African Americans in the nation's capital. If you look up Benjamin Banneker, who was a very contributing factor to the building of Washington, D.C., Black children need to know especially how African Americans helped to build Washington, as well as many other colleges and places that are well known here in the United States. This was like a bucket list item to visit the National Museum of African American History and Culture, not to be confused with the National Museum of African Art. All Smithsonian museums are free, and some that you actually need tickets for, like this one, but to take the time to visit and see all of the exhibits, it's going to be more than a one-day visit, so keep that in mind. This museum starts at the basement level with the arrival of African slaves here in America, and it takes you through all the accomplishments up till today. It's very interactive. It's, like I mentioned, it's going to take more than one visit to see all the exhibits, but definitely worth the visit. I also got to see some memorabilia of my beloved sorority, Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. So here's where I have to take a pause and talk about the Hyatt Place on New York Avenue. Let me just start with, we use Hyatt a lot. That's one of the places that we tend to find good rooms, but unfortunately this time was not the case. Number one, when we got there, the neighborhood itself seemed a little sketchy, but there was not really a place to park to just unload our car. That was red flag number one. Red flag number 2, when we got into the room, it really had a smell that the kids were like, what is this? So we changed rooms. And it was a little bit better once we did change rooms. They were able to accommodate us. However, the door frame in one of the rooms between our adjoining rooms was about to fall apart. So we had to call somebody. Maintenance came in and did like a quick little fix up, I guess, just so it wouldn't injure anybody. And then also the TV remote didn't work. I feel like one of the door handles wasn't working. This was not a good situation at all. So we decided after that one night that we were not going to stay here for the rest of our stay here in Washington. And by the time the next day, we were just sitting in the lobby trying to get checked out and stuff and find somewhere else to go. There's like flies in the lobby. This place was not good. And in the meantime, I forgot to mention, after, looking around our surroundings to see where we were, I did a little Google search and I found this article. And I'm like, yeah, we really need to get up out of here. So my tip to anyone visiting Washington, D.C., before you book your hotels, do your research to find out where it is. Because it's located right there near everything and all the sites does not mean it's going to be the best place for you and your family to stay. We learned the hard way. So do your research, find out exactly where the hotel is. I know sometimes the pictures online may not look like what it looks like now, but at least do your due diligence to look it up and find out where it is and what the neighborhood is like before you book your stay. So after the debacle with the last hotel, we were able to get rooms at the Madison Hotel, which was a lovely place. And just look at the lobby, gives you an idea of the class of hotel that this is. Nerds and Nibblers was an economical place that we stopped for breakfast that was right next to the hotel. One thing I need to point out about getting around the nation's capital is the parking situation. It's probably best to get around using Uber or Lyft or public transportation, but if you have a car, it's kind of difficult to find adequate parking. Clearly, you can tell by the look on their faces that they were over walking around and it was hot outside. But we did have fun when we found this little gift shop that allowed us to take these fun photos nearby the White House. This was also a must-see location spot for us to stop, and it was the MLK Monument. And the one thing I will say about it, it's smaller in person than what I envisioned, but it's a must-see and something to do with your family if you visit DC. About a month prior to our visit, I contacted our state senator, Patty Murray, through her website about planning a visit of the Capitol. They were nice enough to schedule a personal tour for us, and here you see us walking from the Senate building, and we're going to take a little train ride over to the Capitol. I highly recommend you doing this. It gives you a personalized tour versus the larger scale tours you can take with bigger groups of people if you schedule it through online from the visitthecapitol.gov. We were all so excited to take this little train ride between buildings. We did not see any senators, however, but it's an experience I know that they will remember. The Capitol has some very intricate artwork you can see along the ceiling or the roof line of the building. it's almost a depiction of the history of America, we found that some of the images were interesting and probably a little problematic because of how they depict the Native Americans here in the country. It's definitely worth having a conversation with your children about why these things are problematic or why it's worth keeping them the way that they are, or if they should be changed somehow. The statue that you see here is actually what's on top of the Capitol building, but because it's so big, she looks so small up there. Being me, I did have to ask about January 6th and where the people were when they stormed the Capitol, but unfortunately that wasn't part of her notes and a part of the tour, but she basically kind of explained that you can fill in the blanks of what happened on that day. In my opinion, I do think they need to add that information to current tours of the Capitol building because it is pertinent information. Also, you'll see some of the great artwork they have on display, and again, the problematic imagery that's displayed. We tried to take as many photos as we could of the African Americans that we saw that were on display at the Capitol. Didn't really think that looked like Martin Luther King Jr., but okay. My daughter really enjoyed this. She's a big history buff. She bought herself a copy of the Constitution, and she can refer to that anytime she needs to when she thinks something's happening out of pocket in America. As I mentioned, the parking situation was kind of hairy, so we had a kind of a long walk over to the train station where the rental car was parked in the garage. This was definitely a highlight for me for the trip. It is the national headquarters of my sorority, the best sorority, Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, and we also did a short visit at Howard University, and we took a trip down to the Baltimore Harbor to have dinner with a family friend at the Rusty Sculper, which I will say they did have very good food. Back to our history buff who really wanted to see a battlefield while we were there. So I found online Fort Stevens, which was basically in the middle of a neighborhood. And this at least gave them an idea of what a battleground looked like during the Civil War. The last place we visited was the National Museum of Natural History. I highly recommend this museum out of all of the museums that they do have. Wonderful exhibits. For example, here's some hair extensions that they found from Egypt. They had things that were more current about the internet. Here is the Hope Diamond. And thank the Lord we made it back to Seattle safe and sound. This was another great trip outside of the heat in that crappy hotel. We had a really good time seeing and spending time with our family that we hadn't seen in a couple of years because of COVID. And like I mentioned before, we were there for our family reunion. I just wanted to share a picture of my great-grandparents, and this is the reason why we all came together. This is a big family photo. So my advice to you is just to get together as much as you possibly can. Love on each other. Don't wait till the funeral. Have the reunions, or at least do a Zoom and check in on your family as much as you possibly can. tomorrow is not promised. And thanks for watching. And see you next time for another melanated adventure.